When I was 16 years old, I helped 3 elders punish a girl I loved. Her name was Rachel. She was 17. She had fallen in love with a worldly boy from Mansfield Senior High, and I, the auxiliary pioneer, the example, the perfect young sister, I answered every question they asked me about her. Truthfully, carefully, believing I was saving her life. I am 26 now, 4 months out of the religion that raised me, and I am writing Rachel a letter I will never send, because I have to say out loud what was done to her and what I did inside it. What I want you to understand is that long before any judicial committee is ever called, the organization has a quieter system for girls like Rachel. They call it marking. It is a doctrine drawn from one verse in 2 Thessalonians, and it is administered through shepherding calls and removed privileges, and an older sister assigned to you on Saturdays who you think is your friend. By the time the platform announcement comes, the punishment is months old. The girl is already gone. Nobody on the floor of that Kingdom Hall has called it cruelty out loud. It does not have to be loud to be a cage. That is what I learned 10 years too late. I am going to tell you what they did to Rachel, and I am going to tell you what I did. If you can stay with me through this, subscribe, leave a comment, even one word. Do it not for an algorithm, but as an act of bearing witness. Be in the room with me. Add your voice so the next girl, somewhere, hears it before the door closes. Rachel, you were 17 the summer it started, and I was 16. Tuesday afternoons at 4 o'clock, we would meet in the back of the Mansfield North Kingdom Hall, before the Theocratic Ministry School began at 7, with the dark blue copy of Questions Young People Ask, Volume 1, open on the folding chair between us. The hall had not been swept yet for the evening. The fluorescent lights were humming the way they always hummed. The gray industrial carpet smelled faintly of vacuum powder, the way it always smelled. The literature cart by the entrance had not been wheeled out yet, but the watchtowers and awakes were already stacked. You would put your finger under a sentence and read it out loud, and then look at me, and I would answer the way I had been trained to answer, with a scripture citation and a small, certain voice. We were studying Chapter 3, the chapter about choosing a marriage mate, the chapter about being unequally yoked. There was a question in the margin of your copy, written in pencil, beside the line that said, "Only in the Lord." A small question mark. I saw it. I did not ask you about it. Looking back, that was the first thing I should have asked you about, and the first thing I knew not to ask. You were the kind of girl the older sisters held up. You commented at every watchtower study. You were auxiliary pioneer 2 months a year. Your father was a ministerial servant. Your mother had pioneered for 15 years. At the assemblies in Cleveland, you sat in the front 3 rows because that is where the families like ours sat. If you closed your eyes, you could draw the Mansfield North congregation from memory. The beige brick building off the county road, the wooden podium, the back room with no windows that we did not yet know was a back room with no windows. I want you to know that I remember the quiet way you laughed, the way you would tilt your head when you did not agree with something but could not say so. The Saturday in March when we went out in field service together for the first time, just the 2 of us in your father's gold Buick, with paper coffee cups from the gas station and laminated territory maps. You were a better witness than I was that morning. You knocked harder, you smiled wider, you believed it more easily than I did, or I thought you did. I am not sure now. I am not sure of anything I thought I knew about you in those last months. Somewhere around Easter, though we did not call it Easter, you started looking out the window during the watchtower study. Just a little, just for a sentence at a time. You stopped writing in the margins. You came to a meeting without your meeting notebook one Sunday, and your mother noticed, and I noticed your mother noticing, and I said nothing. I want to tell you now that the silence was already part of the punishment. Mine, theirs, ours. There was a Wednesday in late September, after service meeting, when you waited for me by the side door of the hall and asked me, in a voice I did not recognize, whether I had ever wanted something I knew I was not allowed to want. I told you no. I said it quickly. I said it the way I had been trained to say it. You looked at me for a second longer than you needed to. Then you smiled, the way someone smiles when they have just understood something about another person that the other person does not yet understand. And you said, never mind. You said it was a strange day. You said you would see me Sunday. I watched you walk to your car alone in the parking lot, and I told myself I had answered correctly, because I had answered the way the older sisters had taught me to answer, and the prayer that night felt clean. I have thought about that Wednesday more times than I can count. I always answer no. I always answer no, because at 16, I did not yet know there was another answer. His name I do not know. I never knew it well. He was a worldly boy from Mansfield Senior High, was all I was told later. There was a football game in October. He had walked you out to the parking lot and held your hand, briefly, between 2 rows of cars. Someone from the congregation drove past. By Sunday morning, 3 women in the literature aisle of the hall already knew. By Tuesday evening, your father knew. By Wednesday, the elders knew. That is how fast the room moves when it decides to move. What I want you to understand, Rachel, what nobody named out loud while it was happening to you, is that the organization has a quieter mechanism, before any formal judicial committee, for girls who fall in love outside the truth. It does not appear in any pamphlet a worldly visitor would see. It is not announced. It is administered. It begins with a shepherding call. 2 elders show up at your parents' house on a Tuesday evening, unannounced, in their dress shoes, with their Bibles. They sit at the kitchen table. They open 2 Thessalonians chapter 3, verse 14, the verse about marking the disobedient one and not associating with him. The verse the governing body has built an entire informal punishment system around. They call it concern. They call it spiritual care. They write nothing down that you can see. Whatever they write is on the brown masonite clipboard one of them keeps in his car between visits. 3 weeks later, there is a second shepherding call. Your father is in the room this time, with both elders. Your mother is not invited. They tell you, quietly, that you are not to comment at meetings for a while. They tell you that the assignment you were going to have at the next service meeting has been given to another sister. They do not say the word punishment. They say privileges. Like privileges are an oxygen tank they can dial down to test whether you can still breathe. Then Sister Hannah Voss starts coming over on Saturday mornings. You knew Sister Voss, vaguely. She was 61. Her husband was an elder in a sister congregation. She had been pioneering since before either of us was born. She begins arriving at your parents' house at 8 on Saturday with a thermos of coffee and a Watchtower magazine, and she takes you out in field service, alone, week after week. And she asks you, gently, how things are at school, whether you have been reading the Bible, whether you have been thinking clearly. You think she is being kind. She is being deployed. The elders chose her. They chose her because she was a kind woman. That is how the system works. The kindness is the instrument. You did not know that fall that the older sisters had already been told. They had been told without being told. Hannah Voss arriving at your kitchen door was not coincidence. The way certain women began smiling at you in the parking lot with a softness that was new, that was not coincidence either. The Mansfield North congregation had a quiet way of folding around a young sister it had decided to gently extract. You are taken before 3 elders in the back room of the Kingdom Hall in November. You are 17 years old. They do not call it a judicial committee. They call it a meeting. They tell you, after a long, quiet hour, that you are being privately reproved. You go home. You do not tell your friends. You are not allowed to tell your friends. The reproof is private. The cage of it is private. 2 weeks later, on a Sunday morning before the Watchtower study, The presiding overseer stands at the wooden podium and says, without naming you, that a young sister in the congregation is no longer to be considered an example to other young ones, and that the older sisters should make themselves available for any of the younger ones who might have questions about godly conduct. That is the doctrine of marking. Nobody on the floor uses the word. Nobody has to. Every adult in the room, including me, knew exactly which young sister he meant. We turned a half-inch in our seats, and we did not look at you. By December, your parents began bringing a ministerial servant from a sister congregation to dinner. He was 23. He was being groomed to be an elder. He had asked your father for permission to begin a chaperoned courtship. Your father said yes. Your mother said yes. The elders said yes. Nobody asked you. Let me set this letter down for a minute and speak to you who are listening. A lot of you have written to me, asking how to help me keep doing this. I left a support page in the first comment of this video. That is where it lives. What you give helps me keep recording, helps me keep telling these stories out loud for the women still inside the rooms I just described. If it is not your moment, that is all right too. Let me come back to that winter. There is a part of this letter I have rehearsed for 10 years, Rachel, and I have never said it out loud. I want to say it now, even though you cannot hear me. Maybe especially because you cannot hear me. In late October, between the second shepherding call and the backroom meeting, Brother Weaver took me aside. You remember Brother Weaver, the service overseer. 54 then, 64 now. The one who took the detailed notes in every meeting and never made eye contact when he asked you anything that mattered. He found me in the literature room of the hall on a Sunday afternoon, after the Watchtower study had finished, while my mother was rolling up her territory map by the front door. He said he wanted a word, in his quiet voice, the voice that asked you for things by sounding like he was offering you something. We stood between the literature cart and the wall of stacked awakes. He said the elders had been watching you, Rachel. He said they were concerned for your spiritual health. He said the older sisters could only do so much, and that I was a spiritually mature young sister, and that I had been close to you, and that the elders thought it would be a great kindness if I would spend more time with you. If I would let him know if I noticed anything that worried me, anything that suggested you were not where you needed to be. I was 16. He was an elder. I said yes. What I want you to understand, Rachel, is that I did not feel coerced. I did not feel afraid of him. I felt chosen. The service overseer of the Mansfield North congregation had stopped me in the literature room and called me a spiritually mature young sister, and I felt the warmth of that word land in my chest the way a girl feels every word that has ever meant she was being seen the right way. I went home that afternoon and I told my mother, who had pioneered for 30 years and had never been singled out by an elder for a private conversation about another sister's spiritual welfare. My mother nodded once at the kitchen counter and said only, "Then do as he asked." She said it without lifting her head from the dish she was drying. That was her permission. That was her blessing. That was the closest thing to pride she ever gave me before my wedding day. I want you to know that, Rachel, because you cannot understand what I did to you without understanding that I had been waiting my whole life for that small, dry nod. I told him 3 Tuesdays later that you had stopped reading the daily text. I told him you had not brought your meeting notebook to the Sunday Watchtower study twice. I told him, when he asked me directly, that you had said something to me on the way back from field service one Saturday. That you had asked me, quietly, in the gold Buick with the cup holder full of broken pencils, whether I thought a worldly person could be a good person. I told him exactly what you had said. I did not soften it. I did not lie for you. I believed I was saving your eternal life. I believed Jehovah was watching me and approving. I went home that afternoon and I prayed, and the prayer felt clean. 2 weeks later, the platform announcement came. I was sitting in the 5th row between my mother and Daniel, the boy I would marry 2 years later, though I did not know him yet. Not really. Not the way I would know him by year 3 of the marriage. Daniel turned a half-inch in his seat when the presiding overseer said the words about young sisters and examples. My mother folded her hands in her lap. I folded mine. I did not turn to find you. I knew where you were. You were 3 rows behind me. I heard the small sound your chair made when you stood up. I heard your shoes on the gray industrial carpet. I heard the back door of the hall close behind you. I did not stand. I did not follow. I did not say goodbye. I did not understand that afternoon that I had been used. I understood it 9 years later when I sat in another back room with no windows and answered another elder's careful questions and heard the back door of the same hall close behind me, the way it had closed behind you. I understood it as the same kindness deployed against me this time. The instrument was the same, only the girl had changed. I do not know where you are now, Rachel. I have not seen you since early 2016. My mother does not say your name. My father does not say your name. My brother Michael, who became an elder in our old congregation and has not spoken to me in 7 months, has not said your name in 10 years. I do not know whether you were formally disfellowshipped. I do not know whether you wrote a letter of disassociation. I do not know whether you simply faded, the quietest exit of the 3. I have looked in the way an apostate ex-witness looks for a girl she lost, which is to say, I have looked enough to know I do not know where you are. I have been out 4 months now. I live alone in a 1-bedroom apartment in Columbus, 2 hours south of Mansfield. I see a secular, trauma-informed therapist twice a week. I cut my hair to my shoulders last month, the first cut in 12 years. I read books my mother would have called dangerous. I am learning what to do with weekends that do not have field service in them. I am learning what my own voice sounds like, recorded back to me, which is the strangest sentence I have ever said out loud. I will tell you what my Tuesdays look like now, Rachel. I sit on my therapist's couch from 4 to 5. I drive home in the dark these days. For 8 years, Daniel preferred I not drive after dark, and now I drive after dark because I can. I cook 1 meal for 1 person, which is a thing nobody ever taught me how to do, because I went directly from my mother's kitchen to my husband's kitchen. I read a chapter of something before I sleep, and the chapter is not from a publication, and nobody has assigned it to me, and the governing body has not approved it. These are small things. I am telling you about them because I have been learning that small things are the architecture of a life, and the architecture had been taken down in the house I grew up in and replaced with a single beam labeled obedience, holding up a roof I was not allowed to question. There are women still inside that house. I think about them more than I think about myself most days. I kept the dark blue book, Volume 1, Questions Young People Ask. It traveled with me through 8 years of marriage, through the move to Columbus in January. It is in a cardboard box under my bed. I do not open it often. When I do, I look at Chapter 3, and I think about a pencil question mark in someone else's handwriting. And I think about a 16-year-old girl who answered an elder's questions truthfully because she had never been taught that truthfulness, in some rooms, is the wrong tool entirely. If I found you tomorrow, Rachel, I do not know what I would have the right to ask. Not forgiveness. I have not earned a place to ask for forgiveness. I would tell you, quietly, that I see now what I did not see then. That the question you asked me in the gold Buick about whether a worldly person could be a good person was the truest question I had ever heard a young sister ask out loud, and that I betrayed it by carrying it back to a man who was waiting to use it. I would tell you that the boy from Mansfield Senior High, whose name I never knew, may have been the kindest thing the organization ever decided you could not have. I would tell you that I am sorry in the small voice that is the only voice I can offer. So, that is what I would have told you, Rachel, if I had known how. If you grew up in a world where the boy you wanted was the boy they took from you in silence, I see you. And if you were the obedient one, the perfect young sister, the gear inside someone else's punishment, the girl who answered the elders' questions in the literature room because she thought she was saving a soul, I see you too. Both of us were kept small by the same machine. Both of us are allowed to put it down now. If you stayed with me all the way to the end of this, thank you. The support link is in the first comment if anything in this story reached you tonight. Freedom hurts less than obedience. I promise you that.